John Hope Franklin, who is known for From Slavery to Freedom, the textbook, who is known for publishing all these incredible books on Reconstruction and Southern history, who is known for helping inform Thurgood Marshall and Spotswood Robinson, Oliver Hill, those people who argue Brown versus Board of Education, James Neighborhood, who is known for being on the bridge when, after they get beat on Bloody Sunday, now everybody has to go down there. SNCC, Dr. King, everybody's got to be there, and John Hope Franklin goes as well, who is known for being, many years later, the head of Bill Clinton's 1997 dialogue on race, 21st century dialogue on race. He's known for these things, but it's important for us also to understand that Franklin was guided in his work, which he did not initially see as Negro history. He said, I'm training to be a Southern historian. And so, you know, he went to Fisk University. He came out of Fisk, went to Harvard, and he was sponsored for his graduate study, leading to a PhD at Harvard, by Theodore Currier, I think was the name of his professor, his history professor at Fisk, a white man who so impressed him with Currier's mastery of history. He did European history, he did surveys of history, and he so fascinated John Franklin, he came very close to him, and he helped train John Franklin as an undergraduate. And when Franklin got accepted to Harvard and was worried about the money, Currier went downtown Nashville and took out $500 loan and gave John Franklin the money. He said, don't pay it back. This is a pay forward. I mean, this is the kind of, and we're talking, what are we talking about now? That would have been the late 1930s. So we're talking about, right, just in the wake of the depression, $500 is a lot of money. Unfortunately, that's a lot of money to some people right now, as Steve Mnuchin and them try to cut off people's unemployment benefits and take this $600 from them. So, but $500 in 1936, 37? I mean, so, but Franklin saw himself as an American historian who was focusing on the South, dialing in on Reconstruction. His first books, Reconstruction in North Carolina, this kind of work. And then he realized that at the center of America and American history is the problem of Black life in America. And I say problem in terms of the way America looks at it. And so he spent the rest of his life as an American historian, as a historian of the South, but as one who never avoided the question of race, and in many ways lined out how race operates and operated in American life and history. But I bring that up because near the end of his life, John Franklin gave a talk at the Library of Congress. He received one of the highest awards the Library of Congress gives. And he talked about meeting Du Bois. Buck took him to see Du Bois in Oklahoma. He was 11 years old, so he hadn't been there long. Oh, by the way, they've just found a couple of years ago, maybe 2016, a small manuscript, 10 or 11 pages, handwritten manuscript from Buck Franklin. Because as we've talked about, Karen, off camera, and one of the reasons why when you said, oh, we should do John Hope Franklin, because we were talking about Tulsa, and you said, oh, Buck Franklin was a lawyer. He was there. Yes, they were there. And they found this little manuscript, which is now in the collection of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, because Buck Franklin, John Hope Franklin, named for John Hope, and then John and Aurelia Franklin, who Aurelia was a librarian. So a lot of these sisters, again, we think about Dorothy Porter, all the sisters we talked about, his wife, Aurelia. Their son, John Whittingham Franklin, John W. Franklin, is a PhD anthropologist, spent many years in Africa, works with the Smithsonian, brilliant brother, just a very good brother. And he works with and helped get started and continues to work with the Museum of African American History and Culture. And he didn't know about this little 10, 11 page handwritten manuscript by his grandfather, because John W. Franklin and John Hope Franklin were able together to finish John W.'s grandfather, John Hope Franklin's father, Buck's autobiography, My Life and an Era. So there's a book that that Buck Franklin wrote about his life and times, which includes the fact that he was there when Tulsa, the Greenwood district, was bombed and destroyed. In fact, as we talked about when we talked about Tulsa, he was one of the lawyers who filed lawsuits, ultimately unsuccessful when they were trying to rebuild the district. But I bring it up because this little 10 plus page document is Buck Franklin's handwritten account of what happened during that massacre. what happened during that riot, that white riot. And he's writing about, I see the planes, I saw the planes, I saw the pepper balls. It's like, wow, he's writing about this. And that wasn't included in the other manuscript. It's just been discovered a few years ago. But near the end of his life, John Hope Franklin gave a talk to the Library of Congress. And John Hope Franklin talks about seeing Du Bois when he was 11 years old, which would have been, 1926. So after what happened in Tulsa. And he says, I saw him when I was 11. I met him again much later. He said, he said, when I approached Dr. Du Bois after I finished my doctorate at Harvard, he was eating in the dining room when these segregated hotels. He walked up to him, he said, Dr. Du Bois, he's reading the paper and eating. And we'll have to do one on Du Bois, because that's a fascinating character. So much been written about him. He wrote so much about himself, but this is just one little Du Bois story. He said, Du Bois was reading the paper, eating his dinner, and I came up to him and said, I'm sorry, Dr. Du Bois, I don't mean to disturb you, but my name is John Hope Franklin. And they say you're a great inspiration. He said, Du Bois didn't look up. Du Bois was infamous for keeping his schedule. He said he would write out plans, no exaggeration, for years in advance, and then map them back to months in the year, to weeks in the month, to days in the week. And you see these long charts. That's how he says, I was productive because I kept to my schedule. So it's time for him to eat dinner and read the paper. I ain't got time to be talking to people. This is my reading time and eating, right? So he says, I went to Fisk like you did. Said Du Bois didn't look up. He said, I'm named for John Hope, who was your very good friend. John Hope hired Du Bois at Atlanta University. Said Du Bois didn't look up. He said, I remember Alpha Alpha. That's your fraternity. Du Bois didn't look up. Finally, John Hope Franklin said, I have a PhD from Harvard in history. I followed you there. Said Du Bois looked up. How do you do? And went right back to reading the paper. He said, now, after that, he said Du Bois would eventually, in fact, all those stories, this is a great book. This is John Hope Franklin's autobiography, Mirror to America, the autobiography of John Hope Franklin. John Hope Franklin was a beautiful brother. I only got a chance to meet him a couple of times, but just a very gracious man. He said, in fact, one of the reasons he said he always stopped and talked to people was because that encounter with Du Bois reminded him of the chance you have in an instant to impress somebody and maybe teach a lesson. To the point you raised as we started, people are always watching, and you never know the impact you can have on someone. He wasn't offended because he kind of, Du Bois' reputation was well known. He said, and eventually Du Bois became very good friends with he and his wife. Du Bois apologized, and they became very close. But I raised that because he said, I met Du Bois, then I met him again when I was a younger man, and then we got to be friends. And he said, but Du Bois left. Du Bois left the United States. This is really where I'm going with this. And he said at his speech, he says, Du Bois insisted that people for who he spoke should never be satisfied with something so ephemeral as a promised land. So in other words, Du Bois said, you should never wrap your whole desires up in reaching this promised land, because we're human beings. We live in the world. The promised land, I like the way Elijah Muhammad used to say in Nation of Islam. He said, y'all looking for heaven and hell, that's here. Your heaven and hell is right here on earth. You know what I'm saying? So the time we spend in conversation, that's why I said that live piece just really, really moved me. I'm still resonating. It's like, okay, for these couple of hours, this is our promised land. As you're always reminding us, we build it, as Paulo Freire, the educator, says, we make the road by walking it. We're in the moment. And so